We tend to be vendor agnostic, but we have some pretty powerful alliances. So, we work with Microsoft, where we actually have a joint company called Avanade together with Microsoft, and so we're pretty heavily invested in helping our customers develop Azure solutions and Office 365 and Google and so forth. So, as for who I am, I'm from Accenture's Information Risk, Privacy, and Strategy group. So this is the group, the core group that does cloud security consulting. For the last year, I've been leading a team of consultants developing approaches and solutions for trending information topics. And one of our focuses this year was cloud computing. And so I have a couple of tools at the end of this presentation, if we have time. I'd love to show you that we use internally when we're helping customers to do risk assessments for cloud, do threat risk analysis for cloud, all that kind of stuff. Nothing you can take home with you, but I thought our view on how it works might be interesting. So I'm not in sales, as Joe mentioned. I'm actually a New York Metro InfraGuard chapter member. So I didn't come with a sales backup team, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Okay. So the agenda I wanted to cover today was just set some background on what the cloud security environment is. I'm lucky enough to have two vendors that have come before me to do that, so that's great. We can probably breeze through a lot of that. Give you an overview of 5 principles we're finding are really useful for developing a cloud security strategy. Provide some high-level recommendations to you, and then, of course, give you a little peek at some of the tools that we use. So, I'm here to tell you that the cloud computing is not a future technology. It's very much here. It's here now. Hopefully, the statistics I threw at you earlier give you a feel for what companies across the globe are doing with cloud. Nobody's waiting for it. Chances are, if you're a commercial organization, your competitors are probably using cloud to increase their time to market, to reduce their IT costs. That doesn't mean that everybody should rush out and throw all their applications and data on cloud, but it's very much something that all of us need to be considering.
Have you seen a trend with certain industries lately?
We have, yeah, and more particularly a trend with certain types of application profiles in certain industries. So there are certain industries that the barrier to entry is very high. Finance, you're not going to see finance moving a lot of their core critical enterprise apps into the cloud. You're not going to see manufacturing putting their manufacturing apps into the cloud. But we do see industries that are taking up rather quickly. Government's one of those. And just in the interest of time, I'll hang around for lots of questions after this, but we'll kind of breeze through this material, and then maybe I could field some questions at the end just to make sure we have enough time. So we have an IT strategy and transformation group in Accenture, and these guys have been really busy helping people reinvent their IT organizations. Because what's happening, I'll give you an example. One of the CEOs of one of our large customers had a major business division owner go out and provision cloud services for IT services that were offered internally through the IT department. And the CIO, of course, had the conversation with him, why did you do this? The response was, you're too slow, you're inflexible. I got to pay for more than what I need, right? Because you always design internal IT for the worst case scenario in terms of load and failover and so forth. It's just easier. In general, it's easier. So what we're helping a lot of customers like that in that scenario do is reinvent their IT departments in a cloud-like manner. So create a catalog of services that they offer. Allow people to do, to create some private cloud infrastructure, allow people to do pay-by-use kind of services, and then allow IT to act as a broker for external cloud services. So you have a single portal, people can self-provision services, whether they're internal, whether they're external, and as security professionals, we get to evaluate all those cloud providers that we're putting into that portfolio. Understand where the risks lie, and make some intelligent decisions. All right, so as a security professional that looks at risks and opportunities, I'm pretty excited about the move to cloud. It really represents an opportunity to reinvent a top-down framework for doing security strategy. So, security in a lot of organizations has really been a bolt-on affair. It's been using inflexible technology, bottom-up kind of effort. Cloud really represents an opportunity to take an architectural view from the top down, make sure all of our business requirements are included, make sure our management's on board about it. So it's pretty exciting stuff. The cloud security issue, I don't think I need to tell anybody in this room, really goes beyond the technical, right? So it includes legal, compliance, regulatory. You need to think about new types of attacks and threats and vulnerabilities, and we'll touch on a couple of those in a bit. And for the past couple of years, security has really struggled to keep up with the pace of cloud. And that's really changed in, I'd say, the last year and a half. There's been some really great development around industry guidance to help people deal with cloud security. There's been some developing standards that are making transparency and accountability much easier to manage. And of course, legal is always trailing. The law is struggling to keep up with the pace of cloud security. But there are certain industries like biopharma where they're actually organizing a lot of cloud security guidance and trying to get updated regulation, I would say, to be able to manage things like cloud vendors where your data may move around between geographies. Okay, so the 5 principles of crafting a security strategy for cloud include knowing your appetite for privacy and security risk. This may seem obvious, but there's cloud-specific aspects to that. Expect to share responsibility. Demand transparency and accountability from your providers. Use the cloud to actually solve security problems, like identity and access tends to be a really hot topic when it comes to cloud. And then, architect solutions that address the risk and consider cloud-specific technologies in that mix. So when it comes to cloud, legal and regulatory issues are really amplified in the cloud. I mentioned earlier, the law kind of lagging behind technology, but if you think about some of the regulations that we cope with daily, like HIPAA, law in Massachusetts and Nevada around data backup encryption, or data replication between data centers, the encryption of that traffic, or things like physical and hardware security, you really need to define who's responsible for that. And there's a lot of misconception between cloud providers, systems integrators, and the actual data owners as to where those responsibilities lie. So, what a lot of people are doing out of the gate is they're taking the conservative approach and they're keeping confidential data and regulated data in private clouds, and then using public clouds for kind of the low value data. I shouldn't say low value, low classification data, using a hybrid model. And we'll talk about that in just a bit. And there are exceptions. So Salesforce.com is a great example. Accenture is a huge integrator for Salesforce.com. I think we're ranked #1 by Forrester in that space. There is highly regulated data going into the cloud. As it turns out, that vendor is actually really good about the security controls that they build into their platform. And in fact, they offer a type of identity service as part of that, and the access control gets very granular. So your providers should really be able to pinpoint the country or the countries where the data is located, right? I mean, some organizations may not know at any given point in time where your stuff is located because things fail over, data gets replicated around the place. The sticking points that we're finding is that whether or not they have the freedom to move that data when asked, and whether they'll agree to the obligatory contractual and operational guarantees that satisfy the legal requirements for that data, right? And that's where the sticking point comes in for regulated data. There's a lot of data protection technologies that you can consider that may help there. Things like tokenization, data masking. If you're doing collaborative work, enterprise DRM becomes really handy. But if you think about some of the the typical IT security functions, things like forensic evidence collection, or like just incident handling, right? Knowing that there is an incident with your applications and your data in the cloud and having that tied into your incident handling procedures, it becomes a really challenging effort, and all of that is really defined at the negotiating table. So you need to spend a lot of time with your legal and your contracts folks negotiating exactly who does what. There's some emerging standards like the Common Assurance Maturity Model. I have a small URL down at the bottom of the screen. So these folks are developing standard levels for cloud providers. It's kind of similar to ISO 27005 certification, and it allows the providers to profess they're at a certain level so that you don't have to go out and audit every single cloud provider that you're looking at. There's some other stuff as well. The Cloud Security Alliance guys have some great material that they're developing around standard audits.
I was going to ask you about that actually.
Yep.
If you're actually seeing that being incorporated in your practice.
We're starting to actually. So Accenture does a lot of work around governance, risk, and compliance, IT and information, GRC. So we're actually working with big IT GRC vendors like RSA Archer, Agilliance, Semantic CCS, to integrate cloud GRC into IT GRC so that customers can not only self-assess their own risks, but interact with their cloud providers and understand what kind of GRC information is coming back.
Because sometimes in order to assess the risk with a cloud provider, that means you've got to do some testing. Mm-hmm. And not all cloud providers are open to that type of testing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So, so we recommend you define a risk management framework that extends to cloud, right? Hopefully we all have a risk management framework in place. But there's new security risks that come with cloud that really just catch you off guard. So a lot of cloud providers may actually leverage external third parties. They'll outsource part of their operations to external third parties. So therefore, your risk gets extended to not just your cloud providers, but your weakest link could be their partners and their reliance on those partners. So you really need to understand the big picture of that. You need to find the right superset of security requirements that incorporate all the legislative and regulatory controls that are mandated. And that's easier than you think. There's a lot of overlap between a lot of global laws, and Accenture has a couple of tools, one of which I'll show you in just a bit, that can kind of help with that sort of thing. And of course, there's industry tools I can point you guys to as well that'll help with that kind of thing. You want to leverage all the really great guidance from NIST, ISO, INSA, and the Cloud Security Alliance. So, as an example, if you haven't already, I strongly recommend you go out and you find this guide and you read it. It's 80 pages. I've read this thing twice to take the CCSK exam, and it's very relevant, very succinct, breaks it down by security domains. So if you have a guy that's just thinking about business continuity, he can just go read that section when he goes in to negotiate. If you have a guy that just does identity and access, he can just go read that section. But it's really excellent. Of course, this builds on NIST definitions. Yeah.
Just on that, just like
sure.
Most industry following this, using this.
I would say, yeah, I would say that this is rapidly becoming some of the definitive guidance. Yeah, yeah. So the other, the other guide that I'll point you guys to is a European set of guidance that was developed for government around cloud computing. Geez, can't even really read that, can you?
Yeah, what I was going to suggest, Sterling, is maybe you could send me those two links.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, and then I'll put that out to everybody. That way they can have that to lean on.
Sure, absolutely.
Good guidance there's not enough of.
Yeah, there's really not. And these two guides, so this guide is a little bit larger. It was written in 2009, so it's,
Who wrote it?
It's ENSIA, hang on, which is the European Network and Information Security Agency. They also turn out some great guidance. So, okay, so leverage the guidance that's out there. You want to build audits in your contract terms where feasible, right? There's a lot of people that won't let you do pen testing, won't let you do the audits. Sometimes you can't even get access to the audit logs. And you want to build in verification that controls remain in place long after the contract's been signed. There are cloud provider management systems that you could use to kind of detect when security deviations happen. And we kind of touched a little bit upon that with Cloud GRC products. There's also, I don't have time to go into it now, but there are solutions where you can develop a cloud portal, right, that manages both your internal and your external cloud. And security management is a core piece of that, right? So all of your incident response, all of your, your detection of configuration variants, all of that is kind of through a central location. We can maybe talk after this. So governance activities, as important as ever. So probably more so when you're talking about cloud. So at any given point in time in your organization, there's going to be a grassroots movement to go provision cloud. It kind of reminds me of back in the days when Wi-Fi was starting to get introduced into enterprises. And IT security departments were like, whoa, hold on, we don't know how to secure these things yet. And so people would go down to Best Buy and buy an access point, plug it in, bypass your firewall, because people want the technology, right? So it's better to get ahead of that curve, offer them secure provisioning and secure management of cloud services before they self-provision. And you want to make sure that your enterprise security architecture includes cloud-specific technology. So federated identity is a really huge one. You want to be doing a big spend on identity and access management in preparation for cloud. That includes role-based engineering. And there are actually cloud solutions that'll help you in this regard. So if you need a federated gateway, there's cloud providers that'll help you there. Think about virtualized security, not only, securing your VMware farm or whatever it is that the provider's offering or that you're offering on your private cloud, but think about virtualized security technology that can help you. So if you have a bunch of systems on a large VM farm and they're all talking to each other over the network, you're not going to be able to stick a network intrusion detection system between them, right? So you need to start thinking about host-based security controls a lot more. Okay, so in the services model of cloud, we have NIST defines infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service, and the regulatory burden shifts depending on who you are in that chain. So, a diagram that I like to show. Let's see. I'm going to lose my place in this deck, so you'll have to bear with me. Is something like this, right? So, who takes care of the controls in that chain depends on your deployment model, whether it's hosted internally or externally in a hosted data center. And you need to understand, so what security controls fall within that range. Let's see if I can find my way back. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so be sure you clarify roles and contracts. The law really doesn't care who owns the role. They care about the outcome, and they hold the data owner responsible, and that's you, right? So failure on your cloud part, the implications come back to you. Let's see. You'll run into cloud providers. We've been running into cloud providers that generally are missing large architectural components, like as an example, the inability to fail over from one cloud to another. I'm glad to see that the vendors that we're dealing with here are first-tier vendors that do that sort of thing. But if it's a platform as a service provider, you as a customer have the option to, of course, procure a different cloud and then fail over between clouds. But getting their agreement to configure it that way might be challenging, right? So our experience is that cloud providers are really loath to add additional security functionality to their standard offerings, and they'll profess, it's economically unfeasible, Our technology doesn't support it, and we don't really buy that message. So continue at them. Cloud providers have a large economic incentive to eventually implement all the security controls in their solutions that allow for the broadest set of industry use, right? So they implement it once, all of their customers benefit. Let's see. So what we're finding is that hybrid cloud models are gaining a lot of popularity, right? So you have internal private cloud, and there's a technology stack you can buy that you plug into your data center, and there's a number of vendors that make them. So EMC, Cisco, VMware, NetApp, BMC, just to name a few. You can plug in these pre-configured sort of cloud in a box into your data center, and they're self-provisioning. We create portals for our customers that allow people to provision their own infrastructure. Applications move around where needed. That's really the right model if you're risk averse and you're exploring whether or not you can migrate applications to the cloud, what the issues are with that. And then all the while considering what application profiles are acceptable to migrate to public cloud, right? So there's room for things to move to public cloud even if you're risk averse. So there's a couple of them listed here. Some of the the SaaS, PaaS, and IaaS examples are Microsoft Office 365 and NetSuite. So from a platform as a service perspective, you have platforms like Microsoft Azure for developing .NET apps, and they kind of manage from the, I guess you would call it traditionally the app server down, right? And they provide a lot of APIs. So all you need to do is write code and then deploy it onto their platform, and they manage everything from that down. That doesn't excuse you from writing secure code on that platform. So your SDLC processes are just as important as ever. Google App Engine plays in this space. And on the infrastructure level, people like Amazon EC2, VMware vCloud, these are the vendors that really we tend to see coming up over and over again. So you want to demand some transparency and accountability from your cloud providers, right? Reasonable transparency and accountability. It's not fair to expect them to divulge their trade secrets or compromise their network security in the process, but your business partners, and you've probably signed a non-disclosure agreement between your two organizations, there's a certain amount of sharing that's considered reasonable for you to make appropriate risk decisions, right? And that's where your contract negotiators and your legal team comes in. There's some providers that claim payment card industry ready, right? So this doesn't mean that if you deploy things into their cloud, you'll be PCI DSS compliant, right? There's always a certain amount of security control that's still on you as a customer of those services. So it could be security documentation, it could be antivirus, it could be key management. All of these are important. So key questions, you should be asking your providers are things like, which people, including contractors, have access to my data? What testing are you doing that verifies that controls are functioning as intended? And how often do you do that? Does your cloud provider reserve the right to change terms and policies at will, right? That could have dramatic effects on your security and privacy. As a customer, have you accepted, reduced, transferred, or mitigated the risks, right? If your cloud provider is not willing to share the risk with you, then you need to make that clear to management and make a risk decision on that, and consider insurance as one option. So. I mentioned earlier that identity in the cloud is gaining popularity, especially for our customers that are integrating large and complex supply chains with the cloud. What we're finding is that after we optimize IT organizations for cloud, the next thing that happens is business leaders start to think about new business scenarios that they can be enabled through the cloud, right? The ability to reach a broader set of customers, the ability to integrate a greater set of supply chain partners. So identity and access starts to be really, really important. At Accenture, we do a lot of large identity suite consulting. So around products like Oracle, IBM, CA. Those suites are very expensive, and the consulting, I'll say the IT budget to do internal deployments is also very expensive. So where our customers have driven us is to pre-configure those solutions for private cloud deployment. So effectively turnkey with all the processes predefined needed to run them. That's for internal I&AM. We're finding some estimates that hosted identity and access management as a service represents somewhere around a $700 million business by 2014. So customers are moving there quickly. And I kind of mentioned the massive federated identity uptake that we're seeing. So I mentioned earlier integrating supply chain partners. Another emerging threat that we're seeing is stolen credentials being used to compromise systems and your data at supply chain partners. There's constantly stuff in the news. I was just reading recently, I think some Amazon EC2 images, some security researchers did some analysis of publicly available images and found like private keys that allow people to access other Amazon services and other data using those keys. So your responsibility for maintaining secure images doesn't end if you go into the cloud. Okay, so you really want to architect solutions that address the risk, right? So hybrid clouds for the short term and here and now, while taking advantage of the kind of expandability, compute power that public clouds provide. We talked about FISMA compliant community clouds. So both Google and Microsoft offer clouds of that type. There's a lot of other industries that are actually doing that sort of thing as well. You want to evaluate the security profile of each application to determine where they go. And consider technologies like data encryption. So we have a good example here of where data is encrypted in the enterprise and then stored in the cloud, right? You could also limit the amount of information that goes into the cloud. So if you're passing PII and you have Joe Concanon, social security number and address, and your application in the cloud doesn't need that social security number, then don't send it, right? Or do some data masking or do some data preserving encryption to help there. There's a number of appliances and technologies and again cloud vendors that'll help you in that regard. Okay, some high-level recommendations, and some of this stuff I've kind of been explaining through the deck. So again, it's kind of a no-brainer for non-regulated, low sensitivity data to stick them in the cloud. For high sensitivity data, you really want to consider private cloud as a proving ground. You really need to get familiar with the risks that come with multi-tenancy solutions. So the ability to segment customers within a data center and have no commingling of data, have all the security controls work correctly, is a really difficult thing to do. And we find that cloud providers that have grown out of traditional ISP market tend to do this really well, right? Because they've been doing it for decades. New cloud providers, especially like software as a service cloud providers, may not do this very well. And you need to understand where the risks lie, make sure that security controls are working before you go there. Okay. So I mentioned earlier, have the right people at the table, the negotiating table. So IT security, corporate governance, legal, they all need to be part of your negotiation process. Prohibit ad hoc cloud computing requests and try and do it through a centralized, controlled manner. How are we doing for time, Joe? I'm doing okay. So we're getting there. We're just slightly over. Okay. Read your cloud provider's terms and agreements, and then read them again. Have your lawyers crawl through them with a fine-tooth comb. I'll give you an idea of, let's see. So, right, so, I talked about kind of how we're helping customers, optimize their existing IT, then, helping them do their cloud enablement and then create the new cloud-enabled business models. We recommend having a really healthy amount of cloud providers to help avoid lock-in and to make sure that your negotiations go well. And there's an awful lot of them. You insert yourself as effectively a governance, service management, and systems integration layer between your cloud providers and the people in your organization that are looking for cloud. And again, there are tools that are available that I can point you to that can help in this regard. And we're all security folks here, so we're mostly worried about this, but you really want to think about all the other stuff as well. Yep. Okay. So with that, I think what I'll do is take a short break and show you some tools. So the first tool I wanted to show you, and these tools, as I mentioned, they're internal tools. These tools have all evolved into online web-based apps that are really slick. What I'm showing you right now are early prototypes of the tools that were done in Excel. So I think the tool authors would probably be mortified. But it gives you a general idea of the sorts of things we're doing. So this first tool is called Scarab, and we use it to identify what standards and regulations apply to different companies in different geos, right? So if you have, if you're deploying to cloud and your cloud provider has data centers in, 4 or 5 different states, this is a tool that might help you identify, for example, data retention laws or data disclosure laws or things like this. It has, like 2,000 built-in security controls and like 200 different standards and regs. Actually, it's even more than that. It's like, I think we've taken a subset actually for the work that we do, but the entire database is like 4,000 security controls and like hundreds and hundreds of regs. So the way that it works is you define your scope, so fill in some basic information. And then you kind of identify what your geos are. So in this case, I've selected New York, but obviously you can select all U.S. Or federal. You can select other geos based on what part of the world you're dealing with. And then there's some regional selections, right? So there's some questions that ask, are you dealing with credit card data? Are you in U.S. banking? Are you in the health and life sciences field, and so on and so forth. Really directed questions to try and figure out what standards and regs apply. And then there's a set of leading practices, right? So ISO 27002, for example, that aren't necessarily regulation, but some people choose to try and be compliant with those. So we give you the opportunity to specify those here, and we break them down into banking and finance. Payment card, Sarbanes-Oxley, energy, and so on and so forth. With that, we generate a report. So in this case, I've pre-generated it, so you guys don't have to watch me fat finger on the keyboard here. So there's a total of 500 common controls that apply to this. And we break that down into, the detailed regulations that apply, the requirements, and so forth. So here you can see an example of some of the regulations that apply. And of course, we've hyperlinked it to the actual standards. These are examples of the controls and the standards that they apply to with reference, right? So we have some New York State items here that I've added in. Anyhow, so that's one tool that we use. Another tool that we use when we're doing cloud work is something. It's effectively a cloud risk assessment tool. So Accenture is a cloud broker, right? So we actually offer a hosted portal for customers that want it. And we negotiate with cloud vendors on the back end for the right amount of security control that our enterprise customers want. So as we onboard those cloud providers, we do our own assessments. And we have a pen testing team, we have a security risk management team, we bring our client data protection team into the room. And this tool, really what it does is it enumerates a whole bunch of common cloud risks, the average risk probability impact, so on and so forth. It has a description of the risk. It includes, whether it's infrastructure, platform, or software. And then it enumerates common vulnerabilities. So this maps back to guidance like the INSA guidance and the Cloud Security Alliance guidance that I showed you earlier. Yeah. CSA has a controls matrix that's actually really handy for this kind of work. And then we map it out to things like COBIT, HIPAA, NIST, FedRAMP, PCI, so on and so on and so forth. So just to give you an idea of what this looks like when it runs. We've got a GUI here. So let's say we're talking about isolation failure. It gives you the chance to not only view some details about the risk, but you can actually look at some details about the vulnerability, as well as enumerate assets that are affected by that, and then a mapping to those. And of course, you can go through and enter information like modify the impact probability factors, do some financial calculation of the impact should that risk be realized, and so on and so forth. And it generates a report that we find that's useful on customer engagements when we're talking to customers. So that's another tool. And and the third one that I wanted to show you was kind of the flow that we use when we're assessing cloud providers. So, as I mentioned, for example, we just onboarded a new infrastructure cloud provider that we re-offer to our customers, right? So, as part of that engagement, we do things like we try to figure out what kind of data classification we're dealing with. In the case of infrastructure, it's pretty much anything could be in there, really. But we have a client data protection team that oversees Accenture's protection of client data when we're the ones that are actually managing the data for our clients. We deploy we deploy a new IT solution about once every 4 hours globally. So these guys are really busy, right? And they're tied into all of the industries that have regulated data. So we determine classification. We determine actual data type and the requirements that come from that. We determine a baseline control requirement. And then, we spend some time determining accountability for, who's responsible for what. This is kind of what I was touching on earlier. Who's responsible on the cloud side of things, who's responsible, from Accenture, from the customer. We do application security testing as part of that, including things like code reviews and so forth. We have security questionnaires that we use to do this work. I'm just going to breeze through this because I know we're kind of short on time.
Yeah, we're coming up to about 5.
Okay. And so on and so forth, right? So we use a whole bunch of pre-configured assets to do this kind of engagement process. So those are just quick snapshots of like 3 tools that we use. There was a comment in the back earlier about what about analytics in the cloud. I think you were talking about it, and it was during the last presentation. So this is a growth area that Accenture is seeing as well. So we do a lot of business intelligence work, and BI is one of these applications that actually works really well in the cloud because it's very compute intensive. So what we've done is the whole decision process reengineering. We've broken that down. We've applied a standardized architecture to that, and then we've actually applied a number of different cloud vendors to do the various components of that to come up with a solution for our customers. So I thought that might be interesting. Okay, and with that, that's really all I had. Yeah.
Okay,
So
that's great. That's great. Thank you, Sterling. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Hopefully that was useful.
All right, and we've got a couple